welcome to DBT and Fabric, but Fabric is not going to be a large part of this talk because, as it turns out, I'm a devoted Microsoftie, so I'm totally busy with Fabric these days, but my customers are not, or hardly any customers actually working with Fabric. How about you? Has anyone here ever worked with Microsoft Fabric already? No, never heard?
Started, like I recently completed Microsoft Fabric certification.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now we are moving into Fabric.
Ah, you're actually moving in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now we are using Databricks and Data Lake.
Yeah.
So we like exploring the Fabric product basically.
Yeah, okay. So at least some people have heard about what it is and might start to use it. Actually, how about you? No.
I know whenever I use this.
Yeah, okay.
No concern.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. A lot of people looking at it from a distance and maybe playing around with it, but then they realize, well, it's not exactly what they're looking for, and it's definitely not mature at the moment.
I think they're still busy completing their Synapse migrations.
Probably are. But is it? I ran into
from Azure Data Warehouse, of course, to Synapse.
Of course. Because on the Microsoft, that might be a reason why you should use something like dbt, because on the Microsoft platform, things like the underlying database server or data warehouse server or lakehouse server might change at any time without further announcement. Yeah, and if you are 100% relying on Microsoft tools to use it, well, you might have some extra effort in your project to maybe migrate to the latest platform. That happens all the time. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why a lot of customers are looking for something that is open source, that is not changing rapidly, and that might contain some principles that are simply very, very helpful when you do such a project. When you talk about Microsoft Fabric, the idea at Microsoft, when we talk about Fabric, is that it is an end user tool. It is not an IT tool. Fabric is not supposed to be used by an IT department. Yeah? That's what Microsoft always says, basically at all the latest tools. And that's how they build them. They try to make it as easy as possible, easy to use with a graphical environment for non-IT users. Yeah. And then in reality, it turns out that most of these tools are still being used and handled and managed by IT, because this idea that business users should create their own, basically their own lakehouse, their own warehouse, and so on, is not something that has, taken root, especially not in Germany. I hear when I go to international conferences about Fabric, like in Stockholm or Vienna, they say that out of Germany, they are totally convinced and love to work with Fabric whenever possible, be it IT or business users. But in Germany, I think IT is still in a very strong position. And in most cases, they would simply say, hey, we can handle that ourselves. We can do it better than the business people. And so we might not even use Fabric at all because we want a different tool that is more suited to our needs, more suited to the needs of someone who's experienced with IT. dbt might be one of these tools. So I decided, together with Ben, to take a look at it. I'm going to do the introduction, and then Ben has some exciting demos. Normally, I put this at the first slide, explaining who I am. Yeah, Markus Raatz, and you can see the data monster down below there in the middle. That's Ben and me. We are the regional chapter for Berlin. And I'm normally busy doing weekly videos on data and AI on YouTube and LinkedIn, and then also paid videos.
SharePoint.
And SharePoint. I do that together with Michael Gref. We always have a lot of fun, and we mostly don't talk about SharePoint anymore. But
nobody talks about SharePoint.
There are a lot of paid trainings that I made on LinkedIn Learning but unfortunately they are behind a paywall. So you've got to have LinkedIn Premium to be able to use them, but they are pretty successful and also, well, pretty good, so I hear. But yeah, unfortunately, you got to have LinkedIn Premium to see them. Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna quickly explain what DBT is, and then do a little demo, then tell you what it can do, and show some examples how to work with DBT together with Microsoft Fabric, how this can be done. And then I think I'm gonna skip the second demo because Ben can do that much better. And then I'm trying to sum up my opinion about DBT and whether you should use it or maybe not. And then maybe you're gonna
maybe it's interesting if you do the second demo and then I do the demo before we finish up together.
Do it better. Let's see.
So you get 3 demos for the price of 2.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see.
This was 3.
More people coming in. Okay. So let's start with what DBT Core is. DBT Core is the free version of DBT, but let's start with history. You know, as you can see from my white hair, I'm in this business for quite a few years. Who remembers this? Who knows what this is? Who has ever worked with this?
It's a new
Who misses it?
Yeah. Yeah, this is an ETL tool, and it's it's SQL Server Integration Services. Microsoft says they're still working on it, but practically it's dead. That's right. They have a team in Singapore, I think, where they say
Singapore or Shanghai?
Shanghai, I think, and it's I think it's a 1-person team, and all they do is
fixing bugs.
No, that's exactly what they're not doing. I think what they're doing is no, not even that. I think just we should ask Matthew, but he's not here today. But
yeah, he probably tell us. Yeah, very diplomatic. But let's be honest. I think integration services, because it has this nice graphical interface that shows you what happens after what and which data flows where. Because it has this graphical interface, it attracted many people to ETL. And a lot of people got the idea that they could build their own data analysis solution by getting data from different sources, integrating it, cleaning it up, using a tool like SSIS, and then you have a clean result, maybe in a SQL Server database, and then you can do all kinds of analysis on top. Actually, I have customers that still use it, and the reason is it's basically 100% on premise. There is an Azure version that is almost impossible to use, but it's still 100% on premise, I would think. And the migration, there's no migration wizard or so you have to redo everything you did in it. Yeah, and so there are customers where I still even create new integration services packages, and actually it's very, very stable and mature, and it contains a ton of functions. Yeah, it's really, if you have any issues, you will most likely find a function inside integration services that can handle this. Yeah,
unless you have modern technology that's not from
that there are issues.
10 years ago.
There are issues, yeah, but given that it's a very mature technology, you can do a lot of stuff with it, and I'm pretty sure there are man eons, not man years, but man eons.
Some things never
Yeah,
right. They never
Delphi.
Yeah, and
The developers die, but the solutions stay.
there's so much logic in these packages. Logic is not always easy to detect. We can be really happy that you could script them and look inside the XML code. At least, I mean, it's XML, it's not PNV or something. But you can look inside it, and you will see, in most cases, the logic that's hidden there. But on the other hand, it's extremely hard to replicate the logic in any other technology. So, yeah. But who remembers this? Because that is one of those XML files like the ones that normally used to create integration services packages and the tasks in them. And it's strangely enough, the file name is .biml. Yeah? And biml is the BI markup language. Yeah? That was created by a company named Verigence. You can see here below. And they enable you using biml to create your ETL packages based on metadata definitions. It's also an open source tool. There is a paid version that only very few people use, mostly use the open source version. And you can simply define in XML what your ETL package should look like, and then it will just generate it.
And to dig up some dark secrets about a friend, Ben Weisman has published this BIML book.
That's right. And we still call him BIML Ben, and he's proud of it to some extent. Yeah. But it's also there. But you can see that these are tools that, first of all, SSIS was mostly manual. Then using BIML, you can automate it. Yeah. But still, what you get in the end is an SSIS package that looks very easy. And if you, for example, if it fails, you can open up the package and you can see that there's a red circle at some point, and this is probably going to be my error. So for non-IT people, that was the feeling. They like to use something like that.
And a fun fact about SSIS, if you have more than 900 columns, validation can take up to 45 minutes.
Right, validation is a topic. Yeah. So, but this is not what we're going to use today. We're going to use DBT. And this is a general graphic that basically shows approximately what DBT can do. They're saying it can get raw data, yeah, and in the end, you will have beautiful data sets. And on top of these data sets, you can use BI tools, machine learning models. You can do operational analytics. And in between, it will do development, testing, includes documentation, will deploy everything into production, and wow, there you go. Yeah. So it looks, well, it basically contains a lot of the stuff that IT people usually like. Business users don't care about, for example, documentation or multi-layer development, testing and development and so on. But yeah, IT people do. And
IT people don't care about documentation.
No, not at all. I'll give you some great examples what DBT can do for them. And DBT handles all kinds of data platforms and is mostly platform independent. You have adapters for DBT for most major platforms. For example, a lot of people use actually SQL Server on premise. It works pretty well. And Databricks is very popular, but also Snowflake, whatever you want, it's all possible.
I always had the feeling, maybe to add to that, that this was for the BI people and the database people, like the first time that they realized that there's stuff like writing code and source code and versioning and automated testing, which was like an eye-opener and mind-blowing. For many, especially in the old. You're old enough to remember, I'm old enough to remember, all the others are so young they can't remember that there was such a thing as on-premise.
Yeah, but that's the way it was intended to be. DBT was made to bring development principles, like in software development, bring them to the development of data warehouses and data lines and so on. And I think they did a pretty good job at that. So,
maybe a question, Markus.
Yeah.
Do you know since when the first versions of DBT emerged?
No, I don't have a history slide this time.
I'll check. Give me a second. I think it's more. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think it should be more of it. Yeah. So you can basically there is a free version. There's always going to be a free version, DBT Core. You don't actually have to sign up to use it. You can simply just download or install it using your favorite Python installer. So it's basically a Python library. so you can use it right away. And there are, it's also a team version, and there's a cloud version that will host everything that you, created.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Initial release 3 years ago. I would have thought much older.
Wow.
Because it's so well integrated on the on-premise stuff, I would have thought it's more. Yeah. Wikipedia says initial release December 3rd, 2021.
Wow. That's amazing, because there's a lot of functionality hidden inside DBT. So
Maybe 0.9 was 5 years ago.
Yeah. Take a look at that. So this is a screenshot from the documentation, which of course comes as MD files. And there you can basically see what DBT can do. And this is definitely not everything. For example, when they say here that you can use raw data on any data warehouse platform, transform it using DBT, and then you have transformed data on that data warehouse platform, clean data, integrated data, and you can work with it. That is not 100% true, because even this raw data has to be queryable using SQL, because all that DBT can do is handle transformations in SQL. There is no other way. And so if you have a source that supports SQL, a proper SQL, then you can use it with DBT, and the destination, of course, always has to be SQL. It has to know SQL, has to be able to create views and tables and blah, 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 and do an insert from a select and so on. So you get an example with Fabric where you don't have all these abilities, but you can still use it. So we have all these platforms underneath, like PostgreSQL, for example, but luckily in the future, we also have the Microsoft Fabric. Actually, we have it right now, but only with quite a small functionality, and there'll be more coming in the future. Okay. What can DBT Core do? As I said, it only does the T in ETL. It only does the transformation. It extracts data from nowhere because it already has to be in SQL. And it loads data, well, basically in your data warehouse. That's what it does, but it only does it using SQL statements. But it contains testing, because software developers always use a lot of testing in their code before they deploy it. That's what you can do in your business intelligence code too with DBT. And it actually includes a tool to build a very good documentation. You must do something about it. Yeah, you must write a large part of this documentation, but it can be easily presented using DBT. I'm going to show you how this looks like. And in order to show you, to get to know it, I have a very simple beginner's demo. And there's always the same beginner's demo for DBT for many years, ever since it exists. And it's the so-called Jaffle shop. And this is something that you can learn and take home today from our session here. You can learn what a Jaffle is. This is a Jaffle. It's a sandwich that is only available in Australia. Not because DBT comes from Australia, but because a very early contributor who did the example database apparently is from Australia. And he wanted the first database to be a Jaffle shop, a shop where you can buy these sandwiches, which is, by the way, something you don't really find in the data. But he called it Jaffle shop. And everyone who learns DBT most likely does it with the Jaffle shop. Yeah. It's a sort of sandwich, like the Italian, I would say panini, yeah. But for Australians, they put all kinds of weird stuff in it,
and what do the French say?
Croque monsieur.
Croque monsieur.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
1809 kind of.
Yeah.
It's a way of translation.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna, even for my demo, I'm going to use Microsoft Fabric, but just as a database. So don't be too surprised here. I have a
Does the diamond signs mean the credit card is not big enough?
No, the diamond the sign says that if you want to run a capacity like this, you have to have parents who had a diamond mine in South Africa. And
Tell the jury of your mind.
yeah.
So, what you need to, as I said, if you want to use dbt to load data into a data warehouse, for example, or something like that, that data warehouse needs full SQL capabilities, like insert, update, delete, merge, that sort of stuff. In Fabric, there's only one tool that can do that, and that is the Fabric warehouse, because the Fabric lakehouse is, well, like most lakehouses, it is only for loading data very easily and then querying it. But there's no update, there's no merge, and so on. So you got to use a warehouse. And you can see here, this is a warehouse. You can easily create it in your Fabric capacity if you have one. And then you have schemas and tables and views. And I'm surprised because they should be gone. But if they're not gone, I can handle that easily. Because I should have at some point a warehouse. I'm not sure. This is. Let's see if it works.
A big script with lots of drop.
Yeah.
Just run it. What could go wrong?
That's okay. I mean, the table doesn't exist. I can drop it right away. Anyway.
You don't have permissions.
But no, it's not there.
No, it says you don't. It doesn't exist or you do not have permissions.
Yeah, but I'm thinking. Wrong.
Yes, well,
Then just drop your colleagues' tables. They won't mind.
Let's say. Okay, there's. And I simply. Yeah. It's the wrong warehouse. Okay. Yeah. And it's something with dbt. As far as right, it's the wrong warehouse, and it's in the wrong Fabric. That's why the so-called one-lake catalog is so useful. It's in another workspace, right? So that should be empty because that's where it is. So that's a dbt warehouse, and it should be empty, and it is. It is empty. No, there was nothing. Okay. So let's start with dbt running in dbt running in Visual Studio Code, because that's one of the most popular editors for dbt. Now, dbt is a completely different world compared to graphical tools like integration services or so. dbt works only with files, most of it YAML files. Everything works in folders with files under them. Just like in good old Unix or Linux times, yeah, it's very, very similar. It will only work file-based. But that, of course, has a great advantage. You can use all these files, you could check them in with your so-called source code management system and check them out. Different people can work on the project and so on. So it has a lot of advantages. And what you always have is a central so-called dbt project YAML file, of course. Yeah? And this is the example, the so-called folder models. It relates to this particular folder, models. And in dbt, you don't talk about tables, you talk about models, because it could be everything, basically. And what it actually is it a table? Is it a view? Is it, there are even other ways of materializing your stuff. You can switch that here. This says, when I'm talking about the solution called YAFL Shop, yeah, everything is materialized as a table. Yeah? But under the initial folder here, there's another folder called staging, and the objects in that particular folder are materialized as views. Yeah? So, and if I want to change that at some point, if I say materializing it as views, it is not a good idea. You can just change it here and then deploy everything again, and it will be changed from views to tables. So that's actually very, very easy to do. And then under models, you have the tables that you're actually working with. It's not state here. The real destination tables are customers.sql and orders.sql. These are the two tables that I will import here and part of the Shuffle shop. And if you look inside here, you will find out it's a .sql table, but this is not SQL. It's not SQL because it's Jinja. And Jinja is a bit different, as you can see here. It contains all kinds of relations, in this case, references to definitions from other files, well, file-based. Yeah. It contains definitions and says, for example, the customers table will be created like this. It will be created using a select star from staging customers. Yeah, this is basically, there's no transformation taking place here, but of course, there are lots of ways to do your transformation. Yeah? But this is simply how it's done. And then, for example, you can see that Jinja, I have some examples later on, can do a lot more than just SQL. That Jinja is very, very similar to SQL. It has a very similar syntax, but it has different stuff. Like, for example, here, you define an array called payment methods, where you store all the payment methods that you might later on use in the rest of your Jinja statement. Yeah? I'll show you some example of this. Okay. So once you defined all the files correctly, of course, everything is very, very easy. All you have to do is you go to the terminal and you, first of all, a bit weird, okay. You do dbt debug to check if everything is okay. Yeah, because of course, for all these files that point to each other, it's easy to make mistakes. Yeah? dbt will check that. And actually has a few very friendly output versions. It checks the Python version of dbt, rating system. It warns me about deprecated functionality.
Python-based in the background.
Yeah, it's all Python-based. And then you go, okay. It checked a lot of stuff here already, and it says, not finished yet. And it's probably quickly gonna say that it's okay, and I can continue to work with it. At least so I hope. So this is the typical example. And as I said, it can only work on data in SQL. So I need this data somehow, yeah, to be able to run the example. And what the idea, all text path, great, yeah, that's it. And of course, if I look up here, you get all kinds of output, which one was successful or not. The great thing about it is, if I need some data just for testing, I can use a so-called seed. They have a subfolder, again, called seeds. And in that subfolder, they have CSV files. Yeah? And don't use this for your everyday data import. This is only for testing. Or if you have some standing data that you only need once, for example, you can put it in here and then load it from there. But that's not what it's made for. But I don't have this raw data in my database. So I'm starting with dbt seed. Yeah. And then it will check. There's a subfolder called seeds. What are the files in there? It looks at the definitions and it checks what it has to create, what it has to do.
And the seed is kind of major sample data? Or?
Yeah, this is just sample data for the Shuffle shop. And that's what you should use it for. I mean, as I said, only this and only very rare, small amounts of standing data, which might be useful. You can take them in with your project together, and then everyone can work on it and so on. Come on.
So you see, the good thing about DBT is the blazing speed.
Yeah, right. Well, this is normally built to be scheduled at night, so they don't use it.
That's a database.
Absolutely. And you can see here, it's actually using several threads and run here. It's using 4 threads. I could have configured it to use more threads, then it would be running in parallel, like the seed files, and it inserted all this stuff, and there you go. Yeah. So now I should have the tables created, and I should have raw data in here. Let's do a refresh. All created using simple SQL syntax together with the data types and so on. Good morning. Still refreshing. There we go. Raw customers, raw orders, raw payments. So they got that. And the idea here is we have information about customers. And we also have their orders, and we have some payments that they made. And as it is typical for BI projects, for example, the table payments will never actually be used later on in the data warehouse, but they are, for example, summing up payments that came from one individual customer and then say, this is the current sum that the customer has paid, like the customer lifetime value, something like that. Yeah, and that's not more or less a typical ETL operation, something that can be easily done with DBT. So that was DBT seed. So I'm finished with that. I got my data view, and then I can basically just do DBT run, and that would be it. I think for some reason it didn't finish before that. Ah, no, it did. Okay, warning me about my deprecated functionality again.
And run is for everything. Like the data is moving
from the staging area or whatever source area you have defined. It's moving from there. And as you can see here, it's creating the destination table. Yeah. If you do any changes on the structure in the files here, it will create a new version of the table. And now it's finished. Yeah. It's running 2 table models, 3 view models, blah, 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 and so on. So the idea, that's the way that DBT loves to do it. You can do it otherwise, is you need to have the data somewhere in SQL. It first starts by creating a staging view on top of that, yeah, as a layer between the underlying table and wherever you get it from. You first get a view, and then it's doing an insert from a select into the destination table. Will also actually do a merge or so, but that's normally what it does. Yeah.
I got a small confusion because the C you say it's only for the test, but I see a possibility to just ingest CSV file.
Yeah, you can, but that's not what it's set for. Yeah, that's at least not what it's supposed to be used for. It's just when you don't have any example data, then you can just do it like that. Yeah. Okay, and now once it is finished, what should we have here? We should have a few more tables. Yeah, we have customers and orders. Yeah, and for example, in the customers, we have something like, as I said, here, this is the most recent order and the first order ever done by the customer, the number of orders, and so on. These are all things that will be queried by DBT. I defined that it should query this and write the result into the customer's table. Yeah? And that's simple because you can just use SQL to do it, or you will most likely use Ginger to do it. Yeah? And it's doing the same with orders. As I said, it starts with views. You know, it created these 3 staging views. There is a staging view that's simply like select star from blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You might do, for example, some data type conversations here, which might be helpful. And then based on the staging views, it's running to write data into the final tables. yeah, and that's it. No, it's as simple as that. Then, but here comes the good stuff. Yeah, let me check. I'm check to do the right stuff. Yeah. As I said, there are, for example, some MD files in here. Yeah, with some information about the tables and so on. So let's do dbt docs generate. Right. And now it's going through all files that you have, all through your project, and checking, is there any document information, is there any documentation in here? If there's no documentation, it will still look at the structure, see what it can do with it. And
this is the command that every developer will forget instantaneously.
They will schedule, that will be scheduled anyway. So it's finished, catalog is written to a certain JSON file here. Yeah. And then you can even do this, dbt docs serve. And that, of course, is the magic moment for everyone who ever built a solution like this and has to do testing and has to do documentation, because that's it. It's the data documentation for Java shop, yeah? Blah, blah, blah. Including links to the source code where it works. You can look at the project Java shop, look at the models, yeah? Customers and orders. There's some staging stuff that you can look at, but you don't need to, so they normally close it. You even have the information about the seeds. Of course, it's a lot more fun to look in the database, because in here, for example, we have customers. So what do they say about customers? First of all, you get all the information about the table. If you have a description, it's being put here. It's not generated by AI, but you can definitely have a prompt that does that. Yeah. And then the definitions of all the columns. Yeah. What is this referenced by? And this table is mostly referenced by data tests. Yeah. There's, for example, the customer ID, which should not be null. So if you look at it, okay, this is the test. The test is currently not documented, yeah, but you can see, look at the source here. This is the source code in Jinja, or you just look at the compiled code. And there you can simply see what it will execute to do this test. The test is selecting where customer ID is null, because that would be an error. If there's something like that is in there, the test will fail. So that's what it does. And yeah, it has all kinds of stuff, even more complex tests. And I think, again, very useful to say, what is it referenced by? What does this depend on? It depends on these 3 staging models. As I said, it's using them. And again, you can see here, this is the Jinja code or compiled. It's going to look exactly like this. Yeah, this is the way it looks like in my particular instance when I execute it. Then this is the code that it's using. Yeah, and that's it. So it's actually a nice visualization here. Lineage graph. How about that? Yeah. I'm in customers now, and it shows me, okay, customers, you get the information from staging payments, staging customers, staging orders. And of course, it gets a bit more impressive if you have more than just like the 3 or 5 tables, but you get the idea. Yeah. So that's what comes. It doesn't really come for free because you do have to do some documentation yourself. But for example, all the relations between the tables, the data types, and so on, this is something that dbt will document by itself. You can actually have a query interface here searching for, for example, if I was orders. Yeah, and that comes with it. I mean, when you do your loading or your transformation loading with dbt, you get this documentation basically for free. Okay. So much for the demo. There'll be more from Ben demo-wise. What can it do? I'm just gonna quickly show you a lot more stuff that it can do, but it probably take a lot of time to do the demo. It is command line based. And so we have all these amazing dbt snapshot, dbt compile, dbt test, dbt seed. That's actually something that we did, and so on. Yeah, it has all these different functionalities that you can do. We're not going to talk about all of them. As I said, the main configuration is in these text files. That is something that I find challenging sometimes, because you really have to pay attention to how you name a folder in the dbt project YAML, and then the folder really needs to have that particular name. If there's some typo in it, it will always complain and say, oh, I'm missing a file name, blah, 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 where is it? It will help you, yeah? But still, it's something where no mistakes are allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, also what threw me off in the beginning is that the file name determines the name of the database object. It's like, okay, why can't I call this file deprecated and create a new one, and then I'll have a deprecated table in my database all of a sudden? So this stuff is annoying when you work file-based.
You can't have the old name and tell it to rename the table.
Yeah.
You can do that, but that makes it maybe even more confusing.
Yeah.
When is it gone? Okay. I showed you the documentation, so you've seen that. And this is something that you are going to show. You're going to show dbt snapshot. No?
I'm not using snapshot in the end.
You're not using snapshot?
No.
Okay. This is what dbt snapshot does. I mean, everyone who's in data warehousing knows this. This is basically two versions of a table. The first, with ID 1, status is pending, and then sometimes later the status changes to shipped. And the dbt snapshot will detect this and then change it to something like slowly changing dimension type 2. As you can see here, you get 2 rows, and one is shipped, one is pending, and then you have updated, add valid from, and valid to. And this is simply how you would do it. You don't write a single line of SQL code to do this. You just say snapshot, and of course you have to define on which columns is it based, and so on. Yeah, and yeah, you will take it a little bit off-road then afterwards, as I heard. Yeah? But dbt snapshot, this is how you would define it. As I said, it's more or less simple. You have a target schema, target database. You're going to define the unique key. The strategy is time stamped. You have several strategies how to find out which is the old version, the new version. And then there's a column where you find the timestamp, and the column is named updated at, different name. And then you can say, what do you want to use as a value for dbt valid to current? And the value is to date, this particular strange but very popular date. Okay, and that's it. It's just simply how you would configure it, and then it works. And this would be how you execute it. You just say dbt snapshot, and there it goes. It's as simple as that. Yeah. And it can also do incremental. It can do different ways of incremental loading. That's basically slowly changing dimension type 1. It's pretty amazing that, for example, when you all you have to do is in the configuration, you don't say materialized table or materialized as view, you say materialized as incremental. And then when the server supports that, it will actually use Delta format or Hoodie format to do time travel in this data. And so that you can see the changes since blah, blah, blah. And you can easily find them out. For example, if you use Delta Parquet, you will find out, okay, these were the changes that have been made since yesterday, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then it will only load these. And the incremental strategy is done using merge and so on. As I said, in this case, it really makes a lot of sense to read the documentation, because they really have some ideas behind it on how this should work. And I must also say, the fact that they have a lot of documentation, a lot of people worked with it and asked stupid questions about it online. And the result is that every AI in the world is perfect with dbt. I got so much help from AIs using DBT because everything is written down somewhere. And even the AI might even say, okay, give me your YAML file. I will format it correctly. And then the AI will give you the correctly formatted, just paste it in. It will work. And it's true. It will work. Now imagine how difficult this would be if it weren't text-based. If I was working with the graphical tools like integration services. Well, the AI would say you're doing it wrong. You have to change this, you have to change that, but you cannot get the actual source code pasted inside and it will work. Yeah, another reason why working text-based makes a lot of sense, although it's very old-fashioned. I mentioned Jinja already, the programming language, the SQL scripting language. I talked about the example, for example, with an array of payment methods here. Yeah? And this is the SQL statement that it can do. And I think that's pretty amazing. Look at this. Let me get the user terminal. Okay. So inside SQL, it has a for loop. And the for loop will take all the payment methods. And for each payment method, we will create a new column and we'll fill it with the sum of the amounts that have been made using this payment method. Yeah. So it's actually doing a pretty complex SQL statement. And when you decide to have another new payment method, you will just add it here, and there you are. Boom, finished. So automatically work. That's nice. Yeah. But that's the power of SQL in a way, combined with DBT. We have macros. That's not so much magic. I mean, cents to dollars is a very simple example. You just define a macro in the beginning in Jinja and then can use it anywhere in your SQL statements. And just briefly talking about tests. Yeah, as I said,
I will show a bit about abusing macros.
Ah, great. Yeah, but I'm just going to tell a little bit about tests. For example, the column order ID in the orders table, of course, it should be unique and it should be not null because it's a primary key. It's not, and that's basically the first and simple test. For example, in the same table orders, there might be a column named status. And in this status column, I only have these accepted values. Yeah? And so I'm going to add them up here. And then it will check that every time I do DBT test. And for example, it's also pretty simple. I got a customer ID and the relationship to customers using the field ID, that should work. And it will test that and fail, and you might decide not to run any.
I'm not sure. Does it also create foreign keys?
It doesn't create.
Because basically, if you have a SQL database, you would have a mechanism that can do this kind of black magic.
But in a data warehouse, you don't use this kind of stuff. Data warehouse. Okay, this is how DBT test would look like. As I said, I'm looking at test. I show you a test that has not failed because, further it would have to build a test that failed to show you how it looks like when it fails. But I think that's simple enough for an introduction. That's simply how the tests would work. Yeah, and now some brief words about how to use DBT together with Microsoft Fabric. There are, of course, a few issues here. First of all, because I said it's basically a Python library, so you install DBT core using pip. You use pip install DBT core, and there you get. And then you need the connector for your database system. Yeah? And there is one called DBT Fabric. Yeah? There is also one for your SQL Server, Postgres, and for all the others. Yeah? If you do this DBT core with a DBT Fabric, it only contains support for the Fabric warehouse, because as I already said, in Fabric, only the warehouse supports update, insert, delete, merge, and the lakehouse that everyone uses normally in Fabric, because it is less resource demanding. Yeah? The lakehouse only supports select statements. Yeah? What you can easily do to use DBT in these projects is you can just simply use something that we know from SQL for a very long time. You have a lake house by the side, and you can just simply query the lake house from the warehouse. Yeah? And it actually looks like this in the GUI. And the GUI I can show you. Now I'm actually looking for this. This one. No, because I wanted to show you how it looks like in the warehouse. Yeah. Now I'm in my warehouse. Yeah. And I already did that here. You can see this is my warehouse. It has all the tables in it. You can do amazing SQL statements with it. But what you can also do, it's a very simple trick. You just go under plus warehouses where you can add more warehouses. And what you can find here, look at this, it immediately also offers lake houses for you, like this one here, LH via Snowflake. And so you can use the lake houses right away, but only for reading. But this is exactly what you're looking for. You just want to do select on them. Yeah. So I can cancel this because I already did it. So then in the end, right below here, I have the lake house. And in the lake house, you can see the schema and you can see the tables. And for example, there's whatever, the cities table where I get my data from. Yeah. So this is a very, very simple trick because the lake house officially is not supported. But if you add your lake house to the warehouse, basically as a second database by the side, then you can simply use it by specifying the lake house name. In my case, I would say select star from LH underline fired, and then it's gonna use that as a source, yeah, and not the warehouse. So that's basically it. And I'm pretty sure in the near future they might think about supporting lake houses, because you can do inserts and updates in lake houses, but normally you have to start up a Spark cluster to do it. Yeah? These are all data parquet files, and to modify the data parquet files, you need to have a Spark cluster running, at least at the moment in Fabric. So that would be a bit more demanding. Yeah. So I think just the overall principle, what the idea behind it is, as I said, the lakehouse is just as Databricks intended it to be. The lakehouse is always file-based, but in the end, it's data parquet files here, and in the end, you have a table-like interface on top of it. You can query your parquet files using SQL statements. And how do you get your data inside your Fabric lakehouse? And that's really something that's worth mentioning, because there are two ways in Fabric to get your data into a lakehouse. And these are very, very easy. You can simply mirror them, or you can shortcut them. And these are two ways where you can pick most major data sources and simply say, put them in my lakehouse, yeah, just as they are, without any changes. And they're always up to date here in the lakehouse. I'm going to show you some slides about that. Yeah? The general idea is you do these simple things like mirroring or shortcutting, and then you simply have a copy in your lakehouse. You don't want to use this one-to-one, you want to do transformations of that, but this is really what dbt can do. That is the bronze layer. If you use the medallion architecture, then your warehouse will basically be the silver layer, because in the warehouse, these are all beautiful tables. They might be integrated, they might be cleaned, they might be tested, and that's done using dbt. This is what dbt is good at. Yeah, and then, of course, based on that, you need some kind of analysis. For Fabric, this would be a so-called semantic model. You define a semantic model, you give it links to those tables, and then it will be able to query those tables right away. So this is how you call this the gold layer. This is how you would implement a simple medallion architecture with dbt and Microsoft Fabric.
Just thinking about when I use notebooks, how much important is it with notebooks or with this one? So
Yeah, just with notebooks.
I will talk a bit about that too later.
Yeah.
Not in Fabric, but still.
But I want to advertise a little bit for Microsoft Fabric because there are some amazing things hidden inside Fabric. And what is pretty amazing is the so-called shortcuts. Because how do you get data that you already have in a lakehouse, for example, or in a data lake? How do you get that easily into Fabric? Fabric has a data lake that comes with it. It's called the One Lake. How do you get that data in? Now, if the data is on a supported data source like Amazon S3 buckets, like Google Cloud, or like the Azure Cloud, which is also supported, then you can simply create a shortcut to the source. And the shortcut runs just like in the old days with Windows or so. There's no data copying, but the data stays, for example, in the Google Cloud or in AWS, and you simply have a representation of it in your Fabric lakehouse or in the One Lake. And you can query it, and if you create a select statement, it will be sent to, for example, AWS, will be executed there, and then the results are sent back to you. And that's pretty amazing. Yeah, because there's no copying of data. It actually, as Microsoft says, it's a multi-cloud data lake. That's absolutely true. Yeah? There's only one major caveat, and that's the format of the data and the data source. It must be Delta Parquet. But I mean, Delta Parquet is an open source format. So, I mean, a lot of people use this anyway. If you have a data lake that has Delta Parquet files, you could just create a shortcut and use it in One Lake right away. Next thing, I think even more fascinating because it has more possibilities inside, is the so-called mirroring. Mirroring will copy the source data into One Lake. This is actually a copy. There will be a copy of it, but it does an initial full copy, and from then on, it uses change data capture mechanisms to only modify changes. And it's pretty fast. By the way, it's pretty fast if you have a large Fabric capacity. If you have a small Fabric capacity, it's not that fast. You might have to wait a few minutes for changes to come through, but if you have a large Fabric capacity, it's actually quite fast. And a lot more databases than listed here are supported. It's not just Azure SQL, MongoDB, or Snowflake as sources. Right now, it's also Oracle as a source. It's also SQL Server on-premise. And they are heavily working on SAP. But of course, there's already a third-party solution from Theobald Software that can also mirror SAP tables into your lakehouse. What this means when you look at an architecture that I just described is that you just pick your SAP table. It's going to show up in your data in your lakehouse. It's there almost in real time, or at least a few minutes behind. And then you can just use it using dbt, do all kinds of weird modification, and write the results into your warehouse. And you don't have to write a lot of code to do it. And if you say, well, but then I have a copy of the data, isn't that expensive? That is an argument that Microsoft had thought about before. And they say that whatever you copy using mirroring into the One Lake is free.
For now.
Oh, it's taken out of the capacity. You don't have to pay for the storage. You don't have to pay for the, it's not going to slow down your capacity.
No, but when the capacity, I need the capacity when it's running.
You need the capacity because you want to do something with it.
Yes, without the besides the capacity, so you anyway have.
Right, but I mean, for example, if you have a very small capacity like an F2, and you would mirror some tables there, normally the F2 would be 100% busy just with mirroring. But as mirroring is taken out of the resource use of your capacity, you can have it run even on a very small capacity. But of course, that means you have a copy of the data, and if you ever want to query it, you probably need a larger capacity. Yeah, that's the way it works. But that's just a little advertisement. So much for now. Mirroring, pretty cool. Check it out. I think the DBT demo would take a little bit too long. So I think you should better see Ben's demo. There's one thing that excited me and just came out recently from Microsoft. They say, we have seen that a lot of people want to use DBT, even with Fabric. And Fabric has nice graphical tools to load your data. They are wondering that a lot of people still want to use DBT. And so they're now supporting it. They say the DBT is now part of Fabric, and you can execute DBT from Fabric, which is pretty amazing because you don't have to buy this DBT cloud version to do it. Yeah? And you don't have to do these strange workarounds that a lot of people do, like having one virtual machine running with DBT core installed, and on that virtual machine, using the Windows scheduler, you actually schedule these command line commands. It does happen, even with enterprise scenarios. Okay, I wanted to test that, and I wanted to show this to you, maybe in the demo today. It turns out that it only works when you install and configure Apache Airflow in Fabric. I mean, it can be done. It is supported. Yeah. But I mean, that's of course a bit weird. You build Apache Airflow, and then all it does is once a day, DBT run. Yeah. So yeah, I decided not to configure this, but at least it's there.
I might have an idea.
You might have an idea why?
I might have a solution.
Yeah. So actually, I think the whole discussion is something that we should.
Let's have the discussion in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, but just saying from my argument would be, I think that if IT does a data analytics project, then DBT is a dream because you have to work in a structured fashion like CI/CD or so. You have to. You have the automatic lineage because DBT knows all the connections and the relationships between all the files and tables. It has automatic documentation, as I showed. It has an engine that will automatically execute all the model imports or whatever they do in the right sequence. You don't have to care about, oh, I got to take this table first because it's being referenced there and this had to be finished before the next one. No, it does that. Yeah? It just does that. And then even data engineers, even analysts, they only need one language, and that is SQL. And of course, a lot of people know SQL and are very, very happy with it. So actually a dream. And what I also find is that declarative ETL that you don't have to write, but you just specify what you want as a result, is very fashionable these days. Databricks, for example, also do it heavily. Yeah, I mean, sure, it makes handling data a lot easier when it works. And for DBT, I must definitely say it works. Yeah, but I'm saying, I mean, what about self-service from business users? What about them and DBT? Isn't that completely a different direction? And I would, in fact, I would say so. Yeah, it's really. I only talked to.
But then, let's be honest.
Yeah.
SSIS was also not self-service by business users because the moment it got more complex and take this and move it there. No, I think ETL. It's like this is like the low code or no code software development is a dream of business users, but once the complexity gets higher, this just is set to fail. And the same goes for ETL by business users in a self-service manner, or in any, or what's meant by self-service is that any business user can go there and start building stuff. And then, of course, I mean, why do you do a data warehouse? Because you want one source of truth, a single source of truth, and then you have the business users building different sources of truth all over the place. So this also kind of contradicts
Yeah,
the reason for stuff you want to do. But what's more interesting to me is the points before, because basically, and you already mentioned some of that, you get all of that for free if you use Spark and Databricks. Sorry to say so.
Before I move over to you, I'm going to give a big thank you to André Kammann, whom I met at the SQL conference of the Datamonsters, and he is very experienced with working with DBT and large projects. And he says it's almost it's repeating all the time for him. He's being called as an external consultant into data warehousing projects that are basically going completely wrong. And he actually saves them by using DBT instead of whatever they did to get data in. Yeah, because it really forces people to work together in a better fashion. It enforces some kind of testing and so on. And yeah, he says that's all he does. And basically, he, at the moment, is he comes into projects where they're completely lost in time, and budget, and quality, and then they're using DBT to load data, and then everything is safe.
I mean, this aspect of self-service, maybe if you just think about the schemas never, so the staging tables never change, and the raw data never change, then it could be have kind of, they only need to enter 1-2 columns, and it's done.
But the funny thing with the self-service is also something that André told me. He says there are projects where actually even business users are allowed to create their own objects and to load them into the data warehouse and to combine them with the other stuff. But there's only one rule for them. You have to do it through DBT, because then we can see what you're doing. We control what you're doing. We can easily have a look at it. Yeah. And I say, wow, this is not self-service for business users. But he said, yeah, but once the business users have come over this hurdle, and once they are willing to keep working, I mean, SQL is something they can learn, or otherwise their AI can do SQL.
And then you have the data lineage from beginning to end.
Yeah.
You allow a different entry point, you can forget data lineage.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then you actually know, okay, how did this data get in here? You can easily go back to you can look at the source code control system and say, at that point, that was when this business user created this table and stored it here. And
so all the stuff that is just natural for software developers.
Yeah. Yeah, Ben.
Yeah.
But
let me join the meeting, the online meeting, and
stop sharing here.
Start sharing and showing some stuff that I prepared. I will show some stuff, and after Markus showed the stuff that will make you take another mortgage on your house and sell your wife and kids to third world countries for slavery, I decided to go with a cheaper approach for now. So all you're seeing here is one of the free Databricks environments that you can get on Databricks. So if you register, these are not production ready, of course, but you get a demo environment for free that you can use. And then there's another thing that I'm always annoyed with, and that's I'm as somebody who does a lot of different stuff on their computer, always annoyed with Python, because when running Python stuff, this means this program I want to run needs this version of Python, this program needs that version of Python, DBT needs this, and he needs that, and then you have several dependencies that conflict with each other, and you create environment over environment over environment over environment. It's just a pain to handle, and I hate it. I really hate it. So I'm going to show an approach where I don't need to install Python, because I hate installing Python, and I'll follow a different approach. And then I'll connect with some of the stuff to Databricks and show one of the slowly changing dimension things that Markus mentioned. However, I found out that the things that DBT does in real life have shortcomings that I cannot live with, because I've seen stuff, and I'm sure almost everybody who has ever pulled data from an ERP system has. There's columns that are technical columns that are updated, but that don't change any of the content that you're actually looking for. And so you get changes over changes over changes over changes of rows that are not changed because nothing from the business key basically changed. So this is a huge annoyance, and you can start by building views, removing columns and then joining them back in and stuff. But I just don't like it. It's annoying. And this is the reason why I in the proof of concept why I use this. I didn't go with the slowly changing dimension on board, but I chose a different approach that's even more SQL based and more hands-on and more down to earth. And showcases some of the stuff that you can do apart from the transformations and everything if you want to break out of that cycle a little bit. So first, my approach, so you can see that my workspace has a namespace called dbt demo that is currently empty, which will be what I'm working on.
So no data visualization is something that Microsoft should definitely steal for.
Yes.
Because you got to do refresh, nothing in there. Yeah.
It's not the only thing, but still.
But you think it's coming?
So now my approach to running dbt, because as I said, I don't like installing all this stuff on my computer and then creating environments and stuff. So what I did is I like Docker. I did everything in containers, because that's just something that's easily portable. And if I give it to Sebastian, he can run it on his computer no matter what Python environments he has installed or not. And that's something I like, and that is something I like in a development environment. So I'll walk you through how I create the Docker environment. My Docker environment currently is interactive, so I log into the container and do my commands in the container. Of course, I could create a script in the container that is executed when the container started. So that's how I could automate the dbt stuff as well, by just having a container instance that is pulled up once on a timer and executes my dbt stuff and then shuts down again. So that would also be a feasible solution to automating that stuff without having Apache Airflow. So that's also something that could work. But I'll show it interactively here, because then I have more control on the demo that I'm going to show. Okay, so let's start. And by the way, we did create, I don't know if we did it for us already. There is a GitHub environment for all Datamonster groups. So if you listen to talks in another group online, or if you join them, most of them have from our homepage linked to a GitHub repository where they can put demos and slides and stuff. So at least this part of the demo I will put on the GitHub repository, and I assume some of your stuff you can also put there, so everybody can access it afterwards. It's on the Datamonsters.io webpage. It will be linked from our group. If it's not yet, I'm not sure if I did that already. I did it for several other groups, but I don't think I did it for us before. But okay, so that much for introduction. And now let me go into my demo environment. My demo environment is highly modern and flexible, so it's all in Visual Studio Code, as you've seen with Markus. I'll walk you through the structure of what I have here in a moment. So the whole dbt stuff Markus has already explained, so I won't go into too much detail there. My syntax highlighting is not set up for dbt, so that ignore the red dots and wiggly lines and everything, because it doesn't matter. Yeah, because you're a professional and just do stuff fast.
Just like things colorful.
So what do I have? I have a README that explains what happens step by step. That will also be in with the code, so that you have the possibility to follow through. My Docker file is the simplest I could think of. Basically, it takes the Python slim image, runs an update, and then installs dbt Databricks.
Why does it automatically install dbt core?
Yeah, that's a dependency for dbt Databricks.
Okay.
And that's all I do. And then my command that I run is bash, so that I can interactively interact with the container. That's, first of all, that's all I do. And now, in order to get my stuff into the container and work with the container, I created a Docker Compose. And the Docker Compose is also very short. What it has, it basically has the dbt that is built from the Docker file. Into the app working directory, I mount the app directory of my project. And in that app directory, I have a .dbt directory that contains my whole configuration, and I'll show you the configuration in a moment too. And I load my environment variables from the env file, and I enable interactively working with that container. So that's all I do. Simple as that. And now let's look at the setup of the project. The setup of the project, the user file is automatically generated by dbt, so we'll just look at the profile. And my profile is also very simple. My output is type Databricks. I connect to my Unity catalog called Workspace. I use the dbt demo schema that you've just seen, and my Databricks host, my path for the SQL data warehouse, and my personal access token are from my environment variables. And these are just set as key value pairs in my env file. And that's, once you've done that, you have dbt set up and running. That's all you need to do. And you don't need to install Python, different versions of Python, have conflicts with other libraries and so on and so forth, create environments, update those, it's all there. So what I do now is...
You got to make sure in that container that it can connect to your source and destination.
That happens via the env and the .dbt folder that is copied to root. The env is a separate file here that just contains the environment variables I want to use. So I can show it because the personal access token will be deleted afterwards anyway. So you just have your token, your host, and your SQL warehouse as environment variables, and they are just referenced in the profiles file here.
And by the way, typical for dbt would be that you actually have it in your home directory in a .dbt file.
Yes,
which I think is very, very Unix-like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have it in my .dbt folder inside my container. That's all. So now, if I want to use this whole thing, it's fairly simple because all I have to do is first build my Docker container, so build the image, and then run my container and run bash in it, so connect to it. So I'll do that now, here. And you can see that my container is building, and I'm in my dbt environment without installing a single software package on my computer. Does that make you sad? Okay, now let's verify. Well, it's quick because the base image was already pulled, but the Python Slim is a very small package, so it pulled in less than a minute. But it's less than a minute to set up the entire environment and get up and running. Okay, now let's check that we actually have dbt installed. So dbt version.
Lightning fast.
Yes, always lightning fast.
Yeah.
But you can see everything is installed and up to date. Okay, so apparently my dbt environment is working, so we can start working. So what I did now to work create the small demo that I wanted to show, I have my seeds. My seeds is just a file with some customer data. Okay, so I load my seeds. So you
with John Doe and Jane Doe.
Jane Smith.
So okay, I do dbt seed.
There we go. Great all.
Okay, so now stuff is running. You saw that at Markus already, how blazing fast dbt always is.
Yeah.
It's even a bit slower on my local machine inside Docker connecting to Databricks, but still.
Most of the work will actually happen on your database system.
Yes, and it works and it's simple to set up. So Okay, now let's go over to my Databricks instance. Refresh, and of course we have our customers table, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We can have a look at that, but we will, of course, you saw the file already, so why not have a look at it? Because I'm going to need that query later anyway. So here you go, my cluster started, and we see our data. Okay, so now what I want to do is very similar to what Markus already showed. So basically, I have a staging model that is a view, and that staging model is similar to what Markus showed. It's just a select star from my customers table. If you're in a medallion architecture, I'm not such a fan of having that as my bronze layer, because I like to do first transformations, or at least some stuff in there. But you could do it in here. But let's start with that view layer. You see, you can also configure the materialization on an object level, which is what I did here.
That's cool.
So I chose to tell this view that it's materialized.
Just a view. Okay.
Yeah. And so let's run that, and that's. Oh, I always need to cheat because I forget stuff. My memory is really bad. Sorry. So let's run the staging model first.
If they have this one model, you probably could just do the visual run bit anyway.
Yeah. No, I have more than that.
Oh, okay, then.
So, and I want to do that. And now I get a warning that this is not the right syntax anymore, but
yeah,
doesn't matter.
Yeah, minus select.
Yeah. Who cares? So basically what happened now is, of course, that in my catalog, I now have my staging customers, and you can see that it's a view because of the nice classes here. Okay. So now I have my view here, and we can create that, of course, as well. And I'm doing that because I want to use that later anyway. Okay, so if I do that, so now I have my view here that, to my biggest surprise, contains the same data as the raw data. So far, so good. So let's continue. The next thing I want to do is I want to load my dimension, and let's have a look at that. And to my big surprise, it's just a table that loads the data from the staging and has a valid to and Boolean for current. So it tells me current, yes or no. This is obsolete, I know. I'm aware that I can just select valid to null, but it doesn't matter. So that's just, I add some more housekeeping columns and select everything into there. That's my initial load that I have to do. Okay, so let's do that. So now we want to load our dim customers. And of course, once that happened, we can verify that we have our dimension table in there. Now, how do I build the slowly changing dimension logic if I don't want to rely on what dbt does for me, because I want more control over what I do? Of course, I still have to go with the good old merge statement that all of you know and love, because it's just amazing to write merge statements, and I always forget the syntax and I always have to look it up. But that's just life. So let's verify that this has been loaded properly. Now we have 3 results. I'm not in the notebook environment. I'm just using the SQL warehouse for that. Of course, I could query all the tables from Unity Catalog also from a notebook, but the SQL environment is just easier to use for now. I prefer working with notebooks, but and as you can see, I have the valid from valid to current. Okay, so just as we rightfully suspected. And now let's have a look, because now what I need is somehow this transformation step, and that's where macros come in, and that's where I abuse the macros. Markus showed you how to use a macro for formatting a currency or for formatting a timestamp and stuff. And what I do is I use the macro to create the merge statement and then execute it. So let's have a look at that. You can see my macros folder, and I have a macro called merge dim customers. The fun thing is you can have log messages in there as well, which will be output into your, which helps a lot finding out where you are in your, and then you can see that I have my merge into using select, and so on and so forth. And I have an insert step for the new data. So the fun thing with this is it's standard SQL. It's fairly easy to write if you know writing merge statements. I hate doing it, so I do it once and I don't care anymore. But the fun thing is what you can do basically is you could add any logic in here as to what columns trigger a new line or not. You could add identifiers like insert, update, delete, or what the last operation was, stuff like that. There's 100 ways to write these statements. Yeah. I chose this one for now, but it doesn't matter.
How do you execute it?
I'll show you. Of course, my memory is good, as I said. So, of course, I have this in my read. So, let's have a look. So, basically, you do dbt run operations and run the operation merge dim customer. And then what's important, and I learned that the hard way, and when I picked up the demo again, was this. You have to tell it to, you have to tell the macro to actually run the query. If you don't do that, it will say, hey, I did it, and you'll query your table and you will find nothing. It takes just as long as dbt always takes, it just doesn't do anything. So this is really annoying. So take care that you need this line in there, because otherwise you're fucked. Okay, so let's run this. Did I copy it? Yes, I did. Hooray. So let's run operation. And now we're running a merge. But of course, we did not change the source data. So we would expect the dimension table to look the same as before. And I hope that this works now, because I fiddled with the demo this afternoon and I might have messed things up in between. But we'll see what's in the table now. And you can see that everything looks as before. Okay. First test passed. So, everything is current. So we didn't change anything. So let's change something. Okay. So let's change something. Let's say I think email was the field. And of course, as I noticed in my demo data when I prepared it, there's still an old email address for Markus. So let's update that.
Does work, but it's no longer correct.
Yeah. Okay. So we do that. Just to think a bit, one affected row. This looks good, because I would have hoped one row has changed. Let's run this again. But of course, we didn't run the merge operation again. So what we expect now is this table looks the same. We have the old values, and of course, nothing has changed. However, in my view, I see the new email address because it's a view. And in my source table, of course, I see the new email address as well. And now I run the merge operation again. And then we will find out how bad I was at messing up my demo code. And you can see the log messages in the output.
Nice.
which is something that actually quite nice if you have more operations in there and stuff, and if you orchestrate
Also
stuff.
nice for performance debugging.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's run again and see what happened. So of course, again, my source table stayed the same. My staging table stayed the same. And
Now,
dim customers, where is it? I had it before in the,
realize?
no, I want a fourth. Okay, somehow the insert didn't work.
Okay, it's at least it's no longer valid.
Yeah,
the
but
insert
the insert
somehow
didn't
failed.
run. Of course, something went wrong.
Did it say something? Yeah. Problem with the macros may be that they don't create these beautiful error messages that it normally.
Well, the macro worked properly, and I did test that before. However, that's what happens if you change demos right before the presentation, you mess them up. I'll fix that and have the right version
Absolutely.
in the GitHub repository later.
Yeah. But we get the idea.
So the basic idea is you get to execute custom code also in different places, which can help with the transformations if you need stuff like that, and if you want more control than what dbt does off the shelf, which is, I think, also a nice feature.
Yeah.
And also for me, what I like is the whole setup with having everything in containers. And of course, now I could have a shell script that just executes all the dbt commands and have that as command in my Docker file, and then just start my container and it would run all my, and so that's a fairly easy way to automate and have everything also in a very easy way to work with.
And you can use your favorite cloud and just have a container there that will only run for like 2 times a day to do all the updates and so on.
And so that's like a hands-on thing that I like about working that way, because also you don't have to mess up all the notebooks and install stuff.